Hi, it's Alison from Blue Cat Sewing. Today I'm going to show you how to use these patterns for my flip and clip peg bag to make a waterproof peg bag. So it's not lined and it's got a hole at the bottom for an eyelet just in case it rains, which it happens to do quite a lot at the moment. Here's another one that I made and I'll show you how it works. So you clip it to your washing line outside, and then when you bring it inside, fold it over, clip the carabiner to the loop, and then pop it on your shelf nice and tidy. You can download the pattern from my Etsy store where you get all the written instructions, all the pattern pieces to print out, but here's the tutorial to take you through it. First thing we need to do is to put a hole in the base. So find the middle by folding it in half and then folding it in half again. And then I use the hemline eyelets, as you can see I've got them there, but rather than using the tool to put a hole in the bottom, because it doesn't work really in this quite dense fabric, I just cut a little hole in there with my scissors. That's just marking the middle, and then we're going to use the eyelets to draw a circle to get the hole in the bottom. So now that I'm in the box, which is a little bit tricky, as you can see, you have to do it in a certain way, get all the pieces out, and then this tool here, we need to get this part out. So it's a little bit stiff, so push it out with your scissors or something, and then use one of the eyelets to draw a circle around the hole that you've made. And then trim round that so that you've got a complete circle. Then push the bigger parts of the eyelet into the hole. Get that bit that you removed from the tool and place the eyelet on top. Now the ring, you need to get it the right way round. You need the domed side facing up so that the cup side is facing down. Then you put the other end of the tool on top and you hit it with a hammer. But before I do that, I'm going to take it outside. You'll notice that I've got a piece of wood that I'm using as a base for this. But also if I take it outside and just do it on the floor, it's going to attach much easier. If I just hit it onto the carpet, it just takes so long to bang into place. Take the two rectangles that you've cut out. These are going to be your loops, the bottom loop and the top loop. Fold each one into the centre lengthwise and press, and then fold in half again and press. And then you're going to stitch along the length of this to form your loop. Once you've done the bottom loop, then you can do the top loop. Then take the bottom loop, which is the longest one, fold it in half, and we're going to place it onto the back of the peg bag, onto the right side. So there's a notch where the centre back is. So pin both ends of the loop so that the raw edges match, and then stitch that in place. You'll notice that I do a reverse stitch at the beginning and end of all my stitching. It just makes it secure. Then get your front piece and we're going to do the side seams. So you might think that the seams don't match. The front looks longer than the back, but the actual stitching line where you're going to stitch, that does match. So pin that in place and then stitch along there. I don't have a problem using pins on this fabric because if you were using a thick PVC fabric, I know the holes don't disappear, they become a permanent hole. But in this fabric, that doesn't seem to happen. It's a deck chair fabric and it's a bit lighter. So once you've stitched your seam, and I just use the edge of my sewing foot as a guide, it's about 7mm, then zigzag it because some of these fabrics do fray. Once you've done that seam, just press it to one side. When you're using your iron, just test the fabric first so you've got it on a good setting, because you don't want to melt your fabric. You don't want it too hot, but you want it so it's going to work. And then do your other side seam in the same way and press that to one side. Then we need to put the base onto the rest of the peg bag. You'll have 4 markings on your base and you need to match them to the centre front, the centre back, and there's 2 notches at the side as well. Once you've pinned in those 4 places, it needs a few more pins. Well, it needs 1 more pin in between. Stretch it out a little bit so that you get a nice smooth edge and place a pin in between those 2 pins. And once you've got 8 pins all around at right angles, if you're doing the extra large size, you might need a few more than 8 pins and you're ready to sew. You can sew over your pins because you've got them at right angles. Maybe just go a little bit slow over the pins. And then it's not a very malleable fabric, so you can't stretch it. So you've just got to manipulate it with your fingers. If you've cut it out right, it should fit. You just got to make sure that you're not going to get any tucks by keep moving the fabric around, pushing and pulling it with your fingers so that the raw edges meet all the way around. When you get to the side seams, you might want to decide if they're going to face towards the back of the peg bag or the front of the peg bag. It depends how you pressed them. And don't forget to do a reverse stitch at the beginning and the end. Once you've stitched all the way around, you may notice, like me, that it's not quite even with your raw edges. So just trim those off a little bit because we need to neaten that up with our zigzag. Once you've done that, we're ready to turn it through. So using the tip of your iron, just press around the base so that you get a nice seam. You need to manipulate it with your fingers a little bit. Then take your binding and press that under along one edge, about 1 centimetre, maybe a bit less. Then take the edge that's not been pressed under and place it along the edge. And then sew all along, matching those 2 raw edges together. I don't pin this first. I just use my fingers to move the binding around. I find it much easier. You may need to pull the fabric through a little bit from the back. And if you put the needle down whenever you're moving the peg bag around, because you will need to do that, you don't want to get a tuck in the bottom or get anything caught that shouldn't. It's just much easier to move it while you've got the needle in the fabric, then your stitches won't slip. When you get to the side seams, if they're going towards the front, then make sure they're going to the front and to the back if you need them to go to the back. It just needs to be the same as what you've done in the base. At this point, it looks like I'm going a little bit wrong, but you're keeping the foot lined up with the raw edges all the time. Use the tip of your iron to press that seam so that the raw edges go towards the binding. You'll see here I'm on the end of the ironing board. It just helps so that you can move the peg bag around along the edge of the board. Now you remember we pressed that edge of the binding, the other long edge in. So now turn that over and enclose all the raw edges inside. Place a pin in that ditch and keep folding all along so that everything is enclosed and you can pin along that ditch all the way. We're not pinning at right angles this time. I find it easier to do it this way because when you sew, I'm just going to do it quite slowly and remove the pins as I go. I've changed my sewing thread on my machine to a green because it matches this fabric. Previously I was using a white thread, but it really shows up when you're sewing directly onto the right side of the fabric like this. So choose a sewing thread that matches the main fabric that you're using. I'm sewing right in the ditch here, going fairly slowly and removing the pins as I go. You don't want to break any needles by going over pins. And place your needle down into the fabric whenever you're moving the fabric. That way you're not going to get stitches that slip. Check that everything is stitched in as it should be, and then turn it so that it's right sides together, and we're going to stitch along that diagonal. Match the bindings up first and stitch from that end first because that's the end that will show if you've not lined it all up properly. Don't forget to reverse stitch at the beginning and the end of the seam. And then trim the binding down so that it matches and you've got a good straight edge along that diagonal. Zigzag that seam to finish it, again reversing stitch at the beginning and end. Now we're going to just turn that so that the seam will go to one side and press. Just use the tip of your iron. And then trim that point off just where the stitches are. Take your top loop, push it into the peg bag so that the raw edges will pop up inside. And then stitch along there with first a straight stitch and then a zigzag to finish. And all we need to do is pull the loop out and turn it through to the right side. And we're finished. Get your carabiner, pop it into the loop, and it's all ready to go. Don't forget to give me a like and follow me, and then you'll know when I'm doing the next one. Happy sewing!